A very warm welcome to Mike Williams, and it's a real honor to have Mike here today. I've been following his work for many years, including when he was CEO of the David Allen Company, up until his more recent years, including the launch of the Doing to Done book. And it's been really great to get to know Mike as we prepare for the session today. And I'm looking forward to taking a deeper dive into this as Mike takes us through the basics of the Doing to Done approach. And then we'll also be looking at how to apply this using OmniFocus. So if you're new to learn OmniFocus, you're very welcome. This is a site that I founded almost 7 years ago now in June of 2014. And that was right after OmniFocus 2 was released. And now we're getting ready for OmniFocus 4. Should be out later this year. It's a really, really exciting release. And the goal is to support all of you in living a fulfilling and productive life with some help from OmniFocus and the productivity apps that really complement OmniFocus. So there's a lot of things that OmniFocus does well, and it is important to look at it in the context of the other apps, note-taking apps and calendars and things like that that really, really complete the system. And this is one of the many sessions that I've hosted under the banner of Learn OmniFocus Live. And there's basically 4 types of Learn OmniFocus live sessions. There's the productivity themes. So I really emphasize the importance of learning the soft skills of productivity, learning to kind of develop the habits, the thinking, have a basis for using the technology. If we just approach technology without having kind of the skills to use it, then the technology is not going to live up to its potential. So this is a really, really key part of it. And I often feature apps. I've featured quite a few apps at this point, and there's many more to come. Apps like MindNode and Drafts, Asana, and I've got quite a long list of other apps that I'm planning to feature down the road. I've had many workflow guests over the years, and each has brought their own experience, their own life story, their own creative use of OmniFocus. And so it's always really great to engage with these people. And it really helps, I think, to ground the use of OmniFocus. It takes it out of kind of using it in an idealized state, and you can learn how to use it in a very, very real world situations. And one of my favorite parts of the site is when I get to connect with members of the community face to face, and we have office hour sessions and virtual co-working regularly. And I'll just talk about those in just a moment. So the focus for today's session is in the realm of productivity themes. So Mike Williams is going to be taking us through the Doing to Done approach, and he'll be giving us the basics of the approach, giving us an opportunity to look at our own lives and to reflect, to identify the different things, the roles that we play, the hats that we wear. So I definitely recommend staying engaged throughout the session and really participating with the exercises he's going to take us through. Before we get to that, I just want to give you a little taste of what's coming down the pike. So first of all, I'm really happy to announce that the next guest is Andrea Soro. He's going to be joining us from Geneva, Switzerland, that you see pictured in the background here. And he's a software developer, definitely very avid user of OmniFocus and Obsidian. And he's going to be talking about how he uses, in particular, OmniFocus and Obsidian to stay on track with goals, not just have them become afterthoughts or things that he tries to squeeze into the day. He's going to talk about how he moves the needle on these. He's very intentional about them. And this has been quite a long journey experimenting with many different ways of doing this. And Andrea is really excited to share where he's landed on this journey and a system that's really working well for him. Office hours, these are small group sessions, so there's a maximum of 10 people per session. And these are all video conferenced. Everything's kept confidential. And it's a good opportunity to meet people in our amazing international community. We've had people join from 80 countries over the years. So there's many, many different perspectives within our community. And you can come with questions. You can come to celebrate any breakthroughs that you've made. You can just come to just kind of hang out and get to know some other people as well. So these are a lot of fun. I highly recommend checking these out if you haven't already. And more recently, I've started leading these virtual co-working sessions. So this is where you can come and get some work done with the support of our amazing community. And there's 3 25-minute focus blocks that are at the core of these sessions. There's also a welcome at the beginning, so you can set your intention. We'll do a couple of check-ins in between the focus blocks. And there's a wrap up where you can share what you learned by going through this, what helped you focus, what got in the way, things like that. So it's very much about getting your most important work done. And it's very much about honing your focus skills and, kind of learning what works best for you. And to add a social element to these, I have what I call the lounge. So you can come 10 minutes later, or come 10 minutes earlier rather, or stay 10 minutes later. And just have some social time. If you have questions, this is a time to put those into play as well. So that's virtual co-working. And there's 3 open for May. Try to vary the days and times to accommodate as many people as possible. And there'll be some June virtual co-working and office hour sessions up on the calendar very soon. If you want to make sure you don't miss these, if you go to the live sessions page down at the bottom, you'll see there's a subscribe to calendar, and you can add it to your calendar of choice, and this will show up in your own time zone. And you'll see there's a link to go and register for the sessions, and then there's a brief description so you can read what the session is all about. I get a lot of questions, not surprisingly, about OmniFocus 4. So it's been in development for quite some time. The Omni Group have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to really cement the future for many years of OmniFocus updates. I've been using it regularly for over 2 years now, so it's definitely come a long way. And I'm planning to have some OmniFocus 4 content ready to go soon after the release date. And the release date hasn't been announced yet because I know someone's going to ask in the chat, but keep an eye on what Ken Case and the Omni Group are sharing, and they'll be the official source of that information. Okay, and without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce you all to Mike Williams. And Mike is joining us from Westlake Village in California. And I imagine most of you probably don't know where Westlake Village is, but if you just take a glance at the map here, it's just west of Los Angeles. Looks like a beautiful place. I'm a big fan of California in general. I've been to California many times. So yeah, it'd be a great place to visit one day. And in recent times, Mike has been focused on what he calls doing to done. And there's a book by the same name. Mike was just mentioning earlier, it's now available in ebook format as well as printed format. It is a nice one to have in printed format. It's I don't very often buy printed books, but this is one that I really like to have on my bookshelf. But if you are especially outside of the US, you might find it a little easier to get the electronic version. So I'm really happy that that's available now. And Doing to Done is in some ways the culmination of all the experience that Mike has had over the years. He's had a lot of corporate experience. He was the CEO of the David Allen Company, he worked very closely with David Allen. He's the co-author of Getting Things Done for Teens, which I know some adults have picked up that book as well and really enjoyed. So it's not just for teenagers. And he's just doing some amazing things with Doing to Done. And I think it's a sign of mastery when you can take something that might appear sort of complex on the surface and distill it down to something that's even fun and playful and creative. And if you really resonate with what you're learning today and want to take a deeper dive, Mike also offers productivity masterclasses regularly. So you can go to the workshops page of his doingtodone.com website to learn more about those. And there's some truths and one lie that Mike shared with me a while back, and I thought it'd be fun to do a little poll to see which 4 of these are true and which is a lie. So I'm just going to share them with you now, and a little bit later you can vote on which one you think is true. So Mike has seen Bruce Springsteen over 30 times. Mike swam from Alcatraz to San Francisco. Mike met Oprah Winfrey. Mike owned a funky thrift store with his wife, and Mike lived in an Airstream park for 3 years with a llama named Marley. So maybe give some thought. Don't write in the chat just yet. We're going to have a poll a little bit later, and we'll see which of these is actually which four are actually true and which one's a lie. And I've got my own theory. I don't actually know the answer to this one, so I'm really, really curious to learn that myself. Okay, and now it's my pleasure to hand you over to Mike Williams. Take it away, Mike.
So, Tim, first of all, thank you for having me in the community. We've known each other for many years, and thank you for the contributions you continue to make in the community of helping people be more productive, or that's probably not even the right term, be more engaged with their life through bringing them through your wisdom, which helps them get more clear. And to the people on the call and to the people who were reaching through this webinar, it's a delight to be in community with you. And it's the conversations we get to have together, where we share, where we show, where we learn. That is really the most, and for me anyway, the most enriching part of being part of something like this. So at the end of this, you'll have my contact information, and I hope we can stay in contact as colleagues in this community and help one another. So what I'd like to do is really kind of bring you back to the origin story of how I even got involved in this thing called trying to be more productive in life. And just to paint the context, at the time I was working at General Electric, and I had two young children. They were 8 years old and 4 years old, Hannah and Conrad. And my wife, Ariana, and I were at home, and her dad and mom had come to stay with us because her dad was getting medical treatment at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. And at the same time, at work, I had just recently been promoted to the edge of my competency. So it was a stretch. And as I mentioned, my kids were young. So also at the same time, I'm coaching rec sports, and life was full. And somehow, throughout all of this fullness of life, my wife and I managed to get 2 hours together on a Friday night to go out on a date night. And we went to a restaurant called Lunig's in Burlington, Vermont. It's on a street called Church Street. I walk into the restaurant with my wife, and we sit at our favorite table, table number 3. The waiter comes over, and we order 2 glasses of Cabernet. And I'm sitting there looking at my wife. I can hear the music of the restaurant in the air and the chatter. And I'm looking at her, and she looks so beautiful. And then all of a sudden, I'm like thinking about this email that I forgot to send earlier that day. And I'm like, Mike, no, now's not the time to think about email. You're on a date night with your wife. So I try to bring my focus back. And I do for a millisecond. And then I'm brought away from this thought of a meeting that I had earlier that week where somebody said something, kind of pissed me off, and I hadn't resolved it within myself, certainly hadn't resolved it with the person. I'm like, Mike, no, you're on a date night with your wife. Pay attention, bring your focus back. And it was about this time, Ariana kind of looks at me and gives me one of these, are you there? It's like your body's here, but you're not. And at that moment, man, my heart just sunk, because she looked so beautiful and she had put tremendous amount of effort into this night. And I had not meaning that I didn't put effort in, but I had not been able to hold my attention to pay attention to one of the most important people in my life. And I had so much stuff rattling around my brain that it just made my heart ache, because it totally ruined the spirit of the date night. And I just could not bring myself to be focused there. And then what I learned, and kind of on reflection experience, was, man, life has just gotten a little more complicated than I had expected. And my number one tool up to this point in life was to manage everything with brute force, meaning I could work longer hours, I could drink more coffee. And if that didn't work, I'd work longer hours and I'd drink more coffee to get the work that I needed done. And this was the culmination of that didn't work anymore. That strategy was not a strategy that could serve me anymore. And not only that, I realized as a dad, I was kind of failing in that role too, because my kiddos would come and say, "Hey, Dad, can you play?" And I'd say, "Yeah, we'll play a little bit later." And then a little bit later wouldn't show up. And I was making these small promises and not keeping them. And it's like death by 1,000 cuts of not keeping your word. So I knew something had to change. And, it's an interesting thing, overwhelm. You got the overwhelm of positive stuff that you brought into your life, like the promotion was the positive stuff. You got the overwhelm of worry about my father-in-law. You got the overwhelm of what's the practice plan for the rec basketball. So it comes in all different kinds of form. So that led me on this really intensive path of finding something that could work. So like I mentioned, I was at General Electric, so I had access to things like Lean and Six Sigma, and there's a lot of wisdom in those disciplines. I read Peter Drucker, The Effective Executive. I've made my way to Dr. Stephen Covey and through his work, 7 Habits. And then I landed on a book by David Allen called Getting Things Done, which was one of those books that of all the wisdom in the literature that's out there, that one kind of resonated most with me. And I started there in developing some systems that work for me, actually trained my team up on some of these systems and could watch their lives improve as well. And then I started a blog about this many years ago called Zone by Zone, and started drawing pictures and putting short lessons learned into this blog. And that led me to send one of those links over to David Allen. And I did that. And to make a very long story short, a couple of years after that failed date night, David invited me in to be the CEO of his company. And that was a tremendous journey. David is, if you know the story of Bruce Lee has Ip Man. Ip Man was his teacher. And then Bruce Lee takes a lot of that wisdom and integrates it into what became the martial art that Bruce Lee practices. So David, for me, in many ways, is the same way. He's kind of like one of my key mentors in my life, taught me so much. And more importantly, the idea of going out, training and teaching thousands of people when I was there was really illuminating. And after I finished with the David Allen Company, I went and worked at a company called Zappos in Las Vegas. So there I got to work with Tony Hsieh, who was the CEO of Zappos in Las Vegas, and I was the enterprise productivity architect there. And in contrast, where the David Allen Company, the engagements were in and out, very quick kind of engagements, here I had a workforce of thousands, and I got to work with them over a 5-year period. So I got to work with people over the long haul, from executives all the way down to frontline call center workers, and really understand the implications of communicating, teaching, and what mattered most. So there I created a program called Clarity, which is really the 20% of all the stuff I've learned about productivity that delivers 80% of the value. And that became the foundation of Doing to Done. And also while there, I got to live in downtown Las Vegas. That's very artsy, very creative, music oriented. So the vibe that you're experiencing in the Doing to Done book and maybe in this presentation is derived from the energy of putting that positive life force energy out into the universe. So those experiences combined helped me realize I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one. It seems like we're all alone in this together. And, one of the key messages that I want to share is that if you ever feel alone, you're not. There's somebody else who understands what you're going through. And one of the privileged positions I've been in teaching this art called productivity is to witness the humanity of it all. And that's been one of the biggest blessings in my life. And I hope I can share a little bit of those insights here with you all. So in the chat, anybody else have a failed date night moment?
Christina saying, yeah, every date night. Peg saying, yes, failed project moment too.
Yes.
And there are definitely some people that have related to what you're saying about managing everything with brute force and working longer hours and drinking more coffee. So yeah, I think something we can all relate to.
Key transition is moving from that to something else. Well, what is that something else? So this is where the designer part of me started to kick in. Didn't even know I had it in me. But then I was realizing that, productivity and creating a trusted system for oneself is really about taking a moment and stepping back and going from the macro to the micro in your design, putting down all the hectic stuff that's going on in your life, stepping back and looking at a big picture. And when I work with people, one of the simplest things that I do is I have them draw this map out. And I suggest maybe at some point in time, you do this exercise for yourself. But here's what the instructions are, very simply, is to draw an arc from 0 to 100 and draw a vertical line at your current reality on that arc. And the things to understand here are there's a past you. There's a past you with choices made, not made, something that a teacher said to you when you were younger or a mentor said to you that are part of the stories that you're carrying around. Well, the interesting thing is the past you is fixed, but the meaning you can make from it is not. The past you is fixed, but the meaning you can make from your past is not. So then, based on our current reality, we're going on this journey towards the future you. And what I do in the book is I say, okay, and what I realize for myself is this is fresh start territory. And it was such a wonderful invitation to say that no matter what happened a moment ago, a day ago, a week ago, a year ago, I always have the ability in me to use my imagination to create a fresh start. And so the whole energy and premise of the Doing to Done book is how do we help people create a fresh start? More specifically, the design question is this: how can the current me help the future me become the best me? So now I'm like, okay, if this is the design question, now I can put in some interesting thinking to try to solve that. And here, I want to bring you back to a moment in time. I didn't, like I mentioned, that the past me, when I was a middle schooler, my dad handed me a basketball. And at this time, I was living in upstate New York, and we had a long, gravelly kind of driveway. And at the end of it, we had a one-car garage, and my dad put a basketball hoop up on that garage. And he handed me the ball, and I took my first shot, and the spell was cast. And then it didn't take me too long to realize that, on our driveway, we had some ruts. So I realized the real magic spot in the driveway was right in the middle, and that if I shot there and it was a good shot, it would bounce and come right back to me, and I got rewarded. Little did I know that would set me off on a journey to learn about the practice of practice. I got so good at shooting hoops and spraying summer, winter, that I could tell when the ball left my hand, if it was going in or if it was going right or is going left. And then I learned that there were practices within the practice of shooting a foul shot. Really, for me, it became meditation in motion. And I would get one ball back and shoot one ball again. And that led me years later to say, oh my goodness, this is very interesting. This thing we call productivity or time management is really not about any of those things. It's really about holding focus. And more specifically, how do I hold focus over an agreed period of time on something that I need to hold my focus on? So in the Doing to Done book, I distilled that down into something I call a work beat, where you walk into a situation, hold your focus for a period of time, and then leave. And when you leave, give yourself a win because you made an agreement with yourself, you kept it, and you created momentum someplace in your life. And the notion of a work beat was like the basketball. I just need one to get started. And then, boom, I completed that practice moment, whatever that moment held. Now, as I trained, thousands of people, I noticed a pattern. I noticed a pattern of 3 different kinds of beats that are generally out there. There's a micro beat, so I would consider that anything like 5 minutes or less. There, as you know, there are a lot of things you can move forward in your life that don't take a lot of time. They just need one action to move it forward. So a micro beat, small, tiny, focused, boom, can move a lot of really good work forward. What I call the main beat is I realized there's so much good work that can be done in a 15-minute duration. Just so happens there's 4 packets of 15 in an hour. And when I work with people, and most of the Doing to Done exercises and practices are either 15 or 5-minute beats that can really hold a lot of really good focus and intention for people and help them close a loop. And then there's a deep work beat. So if you're part of like what Cal Newport is talking about, there are certain situations where you need to hold your focus over a longer period of time. Say you're writing, or you're working on an Excel spreadsheet, or you're working on a strategic plan. Something like that might require a deep work beat where you need to oscillate energy, hold your focus on a particular topic over a period of time. But each of these beats, notice the yellow in each of these beats holds a little bit of your fresh start territory. And then if you, week over week, design your systems to support you holding your focus over a period of time in areas that matter to you, you create the conditions for you to have small win after small win after small win after small win. And one of the big foundational premises of Doing to Done is small wins, big impacts. It's that simple. So with that as the foundation, kind of like a little bit of the blueprint, we've set up here our design question. How can the current me help the future me become the best me? The life map will give you perspective. The Doing to Done work beat will give you focus over time. And then you can use that to your strategic advantage as you design your week in and week out, and create possibilities for yourself. Question for you: did anybody recognize these feelings? Have you ever felt a little distracted? Have you ever felt a little procrastination? Have you ever felt a little resistance? So these characters are not unusual characters for us to feel. As a matter of fact, they're part of a whole set of characters that I like to call the party in the brain. And this image was created specifically to help you understand that we all have thoughts but we're not our thoughts. Through the magic of art, one of the things we can do is represent what's going on up here so we can get a little distance from it and start to understand that, yes, oh, resistance over here, procrastination, absolutely. That weird thought and idea that I had, yep. Way down over here, I got a piece of pizza. I'm hungry. It's, whatever it may be, there's a whole party going on in the brain. But there's something really interesting. There's this hand way back here in the back, if you notice it, and that's your wisdom. That's your wisdom that's whispering to you. And it's the little voice that if it's too loud, you won't hear it. But if you tend to the things that are in your party in the brain and you get them out, it can start coming forward. It can help you understand why you're here and what you're meant to do. Now, it doesn't come for free because we have to say to the party in the brain that the party's over and actually do a practice to name, claim, and write down all those characters that are in the party. So what I'd like to invite you to do right now, we'll do a little bit of this, is we're going to do a micro beat. And I invite you to grab a piece of paper. I invite you to grab a pen or a pencil. And I invite you for the next minute or two, I'm going to walk you through like a mini guided brain sweep. And I'd like you to write down whatever's on your mind today in your current reality for the next couple of minutes. So if you've got your materials, I'm going to say on your mark, get set, go, and go for volume. Don't try to organize it. Don't try to judge it. Just go for download. On your mark, get set, go. And as you're writing, I will give you some prompts. And I always like to start with, are there any special dates coming up in your life? Any birthdays? Any anniversaries? Any holidays that need your attention? Do you have any special work events coming up that need your attention? Are you waiting for anything to come back to you? Did you send out an email and you're waiting for a response, a text waiting for a response? Do you have any projects that you might need to start? Either personal or professional. Do you have any projects on your list that you got a question about? Like, does it even matter anymore? Do I need to renegotiate something with myself or another person? Does this make sense anymore? If you scan from the top of your head to the tip of your toes, do a body scan. Do you have any health, wellness stuff that has your attention? Any body projects need your attention? Any doctor's appointments need to be set? Any wellness intentions that need to be rekindled or brought to the next level? If you think about problems in your life, do you have any problems that need your attention? Any people problems? Any work problems? Any relationship problems? And how about creative opportunities? If you think about that little voice inside you that's been whispering to you for many years, hey, remember me? You used to love to do this, X, whatever X is. And you feel a calling to return to that. or you feel calling into a new vocation or avocation or hobby to express your creativity. What might that be? Okay. Pens down. Hopefully you captured some good stuff for yourself. And when you count up the things that you captured, notice you now have a proof point that with a pen and a piece of paper in a couple minutes, I can name, claim, and write down these things that are on my mind. And this is just level one. And we can keep on going and help you discover more. But this is a proof point that a micro beat, well placed, can help you capture a lot of things. This particular move is really good, post meeting, the first 5 minutes after you get out of a meeting, the first 5 minutes before you go to a meeting, to help you clear the space so you can be in that meeting. So it's got a lot of, wonderful uses. My favorite time to do a brain sweep is first thing in the morning, where I'm actually capturing kind of my dream state. And I invite you to brain sweep in words and brain sweep in pictures too, because I love to draw pictures of what's in my brain, not just words. Now, your brain sweep list probably looks something random like this: dentist, mom, need a will, check engine light, presentation for conference. It's really interesting. And whatever you wrote down on that list, the technical term for it is called stuff. You've got big stuff on there. You got little stuff that needs to be managed. You got medium-sized stuff. You got funky stuff. You got cool stuff. You got strange stuff. All of it is yours. It's your current reality. And it comes from, the beautiful part of you that is you. So it's uniquely yours. And what we've done here is now we've set you up for the journey that you're on and the framing that I would love you to embrace, because we're going to talk about it a little bit more, which is you're the hero of this story, and your foe is stuff. So if the hero persistently, consistently, handles and transforms stuff into something that can be useful, then stuff will not feel so overwhelming. However, if you don't have a method for doing that, stuff will pile on and you'll feel the weight of it. And you'll probably even feel your body change as you're like tense and holding all that stuff. Or failing on a date night like I did with my wife because I didn't have a system and I certainly didn't understand this game I was playing. So as you progress through life, and no matter where you are in life, there's always a current reality that you are living in, and those around you are living in a current reality as well. So one of the best things that we can do is just notice that over time, our stuff shifts to handle the complexity of our life. And as far as common ground that we have here together today, before we hop into OmniFocus, I just want to have the common ground around stuff, getting stuff off your mind. And then the name of the book is transforming that stuff into effective doing statements and done statements. So a doing statement has a very specific, unique form. It's a doing verb plus a phrase. Like I mentioned, you're a hero of the story. So if I were a director saying action, you'd be calling somebody, drafting something, Googling something, nailing something in the wall. So those are the doing verbs that lead you into action. So these are love notes to your future self, so you don't even have to think twice about them. So how can the current me help the future me become a better me? Number one, a clear next action. And then number two, doing to what? Done. What the heck is done? What's done look like? In the business world, we call those projects. And a project is a finish line. It's the answer to a binary question. Is this done? And it has two optional answers, yes or no. If yes, check it off. If no, we go back to the first question, what does doing look like? And then what's the one next action that will create momentum so I can move this thing forward? And a good done statement, what I recommend is putting it in the past tense. So in this example, I need to go to the dentist. Why? Well, I've got a chipped tooth that needs repair. So chipped tooth repaired is what done looks like. My next action is call the dentist. So from a doing to done standpoint, this is the minimum viable product that I try to get all my clients to. This very simple statement, one next action and a clear finish line. And that is the 20% of the activity that delivers 80% of the value for my clients. Yes. Can there be more than one next action? Certainly, with caveats. They can't be dependent on each other, all that kind of stuff. But what I did find, in my time at Zappos is let's make it even simpler. What's the one you're going to do to move something forward, and just put that information in front of your eyeballs, and it makes it really clear what you need to do. Let's simplify it. One next action. What's the done statement look like? So after you process your stuff, what you're going to end up with is a bunch of beautiful love notes to your future self. It's very clear on what the doing looks like, and it's very clear what the done looks like. And you'll notice that some actions might be associated with just a single action. They don't have a project. For example, if you're thinking about your mom on a walk and you just want to call her. So we would call that a single action. Now, here's where we start to get into what we really wanted to cover today, which is what is the origin story of your stuff, your actions, and your projects? The origin story lives in this territory. It lives in the territory of human beings that are deliciously complex. So as you sit here today, I see your head in our little Zoom boxes, but I know underneath that, there are many mini superheroes on a journey. You have yourself, kind of the mind, body, spirit part of you that you're holding. We call these things roles. You are a son or a daughter. You might have a spouse or a partner. You might be a member of a family. You might have work roles. You might be an entrepreneur. You might have business 1, business 2, business 3. You might be a dancer, a videographer, a DJ, a birder, a citizen scientist. All these different roles are so beautiful, and we all have them. The key is, have you defined them? Do you own them? Do you know them? So Tim is going to drop in a couple links here for you. And these are materials that are available in the Doing to Done book, but I wanted you to have them here. And what I'd like us to do is spend a couple moments just talking about the beauty of roles. This is one of the kind of unique things about Doing to Done. It's a very role-based solution. Now, roles are dynamic. So we have different roles in our lives, and here are the 5 main types. You have an anchor role. That's something I would call the me role. My mind, body, and spirit. Something's got to hold that, and it doesn't shift over time because no matter where I go, I'm always there, me. Now, you have current roles that reflect your current reality. So these current roles, you reflect, your relationships, your work relationships, and things like that. Whatever your stuff is on your brain sweep list, I bet you a lot of that, if not all of that, is coming from your current roles. Then in life, you can have temporary or transitional roles. These are shorter term roles that you might need to hold projects and practices and actions that you're working on. So, for example, you may have a loved one who needs care, and you are the caregiver for a period of time until they are on the mend. And in this role, it's not a forever role, but it's a temporary role that needs your time, attention, and it's something that you might want to evoke because for a period of time, you're that superhero that's playing the caregiver role. In a work context, it might be you've been assigned a temporary job as part of a high potential program, and that's a role that you're going to hold during the duration of the program. A transitional role might be you are leaving a job and you need to find a new job. So you have a role called, the next me. You get a chance to define what you're going to do in the next period of time in life and seek out those opportunities. New and emerging roles are kind of like these roles that either the wisdom is talking to you and saying, remember that thing you used to love to do? You might want to bring it back. That's one example. A new or emerging role could be, what we're seeing all around us right now with, Chat GPT. One of the new and emerging roles in industry is a prompt engineer. Well, that role didn't exist a couple of years ago, and now it exists. So there's these different roles. And the last one is a quite interesting one. Seems simple on the surface. You have these past roles. Like we all used to be high school students, but we are no longer. Now, depending on your life journey, you might have been, like I had one client who used to be a stepmom, but is no longer a stepmom because of a relationship change. So she had to define her new relationship with a human being that used to be a stepchild. So it could be very subtle, interesting things like that. So roles are really dynamic. And each role that you hold has a very specific structure. There's a why this role exists in your life, and that can be held with your purpose and vision. And then there's the how you do the role, and that's through practices and projects. And then there's the what, which is always the action. So the why of your role enchants the role with a story that you live into. That superhero, that mini superhero within you has a story and is seeking to fulfill it. That's defined in the why part of it. The how is like, how do they organize their life and the scenes that they're going to be creating? So let me give you an example. So in my life, I have these different roles. So I have me, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I have family, friend, and I have my work roles. So I'd like you to take a minute and write down the roles that you're holding in your life. If you were to define the roles of your life, what might they look like and how would you name them? And you can look at your brain sweep list and say, what's the origin story of that stuff? Where'd that come from? You can look at your current setup in OmniFocus and say, where'd this come from? And you might find some roles that are important to you. All these different hats that you wear. And as you're doing that, and if you finish early, write in the chat the names of some of the roles that you've identified for yourself. I always find it interesting and inspiring to see the roles that others hold. Dog that. Love that. I had one person name their pet role Pawrent, Pawrent. If you're in a work context too, sometimes you're a manager. But if you're in work, you're definitely an employee. And then what are you employed to do? You might have a job description, but that might be broken down into like 3 different roles. Husband, horses, wife, mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, friend, dog mom, colleague, coach, love it, editor, business owner. Yes. So just notice how deliciously complex we are, right? We have all these different roles, and all these different roles are playing a role in our life. So in the tools that Tim gave you, I invite you to go through the activity of defining the purpose for each of your roles. We won't do this now, but this is a great activity. What we're going to take is the names that you created, and we're going to bring those over to the next part of the presentation today, which is your role names as they relate to OmniFocus. But let me give you an example of what a filled out role clarity map might look like. So here's me. Here's my anchor role. This is Mike. What's the purpose? To help myself and others channel energy towards positive outcomes, creating more joy and less stress. Actually creating more joy and reducing suffering is really what I like to do. So that's a purpose statement. In this role as husband and father, create the conditions to love and be loved. And in my role as a writer, to write books to open up possibilities for myself and others. So that's step 1, finding the purpose of the roles. Step 2, this is the interesting step. And if you do this step, you will not be disappointed. I invite you to draw a very simple picture of what this role means to you, like a picture of you in this role. So look at this. This picture is so simple, but as I drew it, it brought forward so many thoughts, so many images of what my vision of success was for this role. So this is me handing a piece of energy off to the world. There's a little gap here between our hands and the hand of the receiver, because my job is to put the energy out. I can never make people take it, but my job is to put it out. So to channel energy, to try to guide it towards positive outcomes. In my husband-father role, you can't see it, but this is me and my wife walking down the street with a twinkle in our eye, people wondering why we're so mischievous and what's the secret. And we're having fun. All right. That's my doodle. You can't see all that, but I see that when I look at that doodle. And in my writer role, here you see me walking into a writer workbeat. Basically, writing is just being a good plotter. You just walk in, you set up your coffee here, put a timer here, you write for 90 minutes, you take your coffee and your timer and you walk out. And then in that space, that's where writing happens. So that's my vision of being a writer for me. And then each of your roles, I invite you to define the 1 to 3 practices that matter most. Going back to the theme of what's the 20% that produces 80% of the value. So for me as an individual, if I swim, write, and share, that pulls through really good things in my life. As a husband and father, if I have dinner at the table, coffee dates with my wife, and go on son-daughter adventures, that pulls through so much goodness. And then as a writer, if I draw, write, and edit as separate practices, that helps me move forward in my role as a writer. And then, as we saw previously, you can transform stuff into projects and actions too, which are incremental finish lines that this superhero wants to do. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're looking forward, if you want to go deeper in this, you can definitely, the book's a good resource for you. So just to recap here, you are a wonderful, deliciously complex human being. When you name a role, you claim it and give it room to evolve. And now when I start saying yes to things, I can have more of a purpose behind it. Not only that, it might give me a more purposeful no to some things, so I can say a more purposeful yes to other things. So that's the value of having your roles named, okay? And this is a blueprint, a meta thinking blueprint that we're now going to bring over into OmniFocus and help you see what an OmniFocus system set up as a role-based system can do. And as we set this up, you're going to be seeing the superhero living into a new land of possibilities for themselves, for all their roles. And what I like to say is it increases your return on luck, because you're creating a little socket in your brain that I'm going to see the world a little differently. So when I'm making choices, do I want to do this, yes or no? Then you can make different choices. Colleagues and guests on the call and people listening in, if you want to grab, some of my contact information, it's here for you as well. And particularly the bottom piece here, if anybody ever wants to have a virtual coffee with me, there's a link you can use right there to do that.
Thanks so much, Mike. And I really appreciate everything you've shared so far, and looking forward to delving into OmniFocus in just a moment. Before we do, this is the moment we'll find out which of these is the lie and which for the truth.
One that is the lie is Mike owned a funky thrift store with his wife. No,
that was, yeah, okay, excellent.
That was the lie. My wife owned it wholly without me.
So there was a thrift store, just wasn't a co-owned one. Yeah. Okay. That's the one I chose, actually. But I've had about 2 months to think about this. So,
big Bruce Springsteen fan, saw him 30 times, scheduled to see him again in December in LA. My son and I swam from Alcatraz to San Francisco. So talking about, son, dad adventures, that definitely fit that one. Met Oprah Winfrey when I used to be on the board of the ATD, the Association of Talent Development. So I met her at one of our large conferences. And when I worked at Zappos, I lived in an Airstream park in Las Vegas, a very unique community with Tony Hsieh and a lot of creative people from the Las Vegas area. And we did have a llama. He was actually an alpaca, but we called him a llama, named Marley, that used to walk around and sometimes spit on people.
Yeah, llamas are known for doing that, for sure.
Yes.
Mike and I have put together a demo database to show you how to apply or one way of applying anyway, the doing to done approach using OmniFocus, because I think that really helps to sort of ground the approach when you see an example. And you could use this as a starting point. You could take elements from it. Whatever works for you.
Like with any good song, if you can play, typically a really good song, you can play on the guitar, and it's very simple and powerful. And that's the way I think of the core elements of a good doing to done system, which is you have a role, the roles hold your projects, and a project has one next action. Notice in the panel that Tim has prepared that all the different hats you wear have been defined. And he did 2 layers. And this is a nice bifurcation, my personal roles and my professional roles. And then within each of those, there are certain roles that I have. So in our example here, we have the role of self. A person's a golfer, a person's a son, a husband and father, and a volleyball coach. So if you actually look in the Doing to Done book, there's a person who fits this category. And these are the personal roles this person was holding. And then on the professional side, they were an executive, they were a coach within the business context, and they were a product advisor as well. So those are the different professional roles that they held. So as you think about the roles that you defined previously, how might you create those? Now, Tim, let's go down to the which I think the self role, and let's go to the chipped tooth repaired. So on this one, you can see that the very simple structure is chipped tooth repaired, which is the project. And Tim has a wonderful way to identify projects with the compass. So that's the journey that you're going on to get to this destination. And I think one of the things that Tim and I both really like is the use of emojis to your strategic advantage if that helps you. And then notice that the one next action there is call dentist to schedule an appointment. And in this particular project, we've got two concurrent next actions that you could take. And the other one is contact HR about coverage. So those are two different actions, but fundamentally, role, project, action is what we're looking for. And within a project, we're looking for that project verb in the past tense is the way I look for it, but sometimes it can be in the present tense. But as long as you've got a good project verb and statement there that allows you to answer it in the affirmative, yes, or the negative, no, then you know you've got a good project definition. And then your next action is if you can see the superhero doing it. If somebody said action, is that going to create momentum? Yes, you've landed on a good one. Did you write it in such a way that it breaks down resistance and procrastination? Well, that's a little bit of the art of defining the scope of one next action. If something feels too big, I always recommend making it smaller. Tim, anything else you want to highlight on that piece?
Yeah, sure. You'll notice that there's a link here. In this case, it's a link to a document in Craft, which is my note-taking app of choice. And I think that's sometimes where people kind of overcomplicate the OmniFocus system, is they put a lot of information in OmniFocus that doesn't really belong. It kind of detracts from the mission of the project and the specific actions. So if I click on this as an example, this goes to a note where you can keep track of a conversation that they had. Maybe there's some information you're going to need for HR down the road, or for submitting the claim, or something along those lines. I've even put in a resource here that I found on the internet. So you can build up this great library of information. You can take any notes that pop into your mind related to this project, but then still keep the OmniFocus project nice and clean and easy to look at. There's no kind of overwhelm in this.
Yeah. And one of the things that I recommend for the people that I coach within the Doing to Done methodology is to have a very distinct action system. So OmniFocus, when you look at the icon and you see it on your computer or on your phone, what I want the brain to think is, here is where I'll see my roles, my projects, and my actions. That's all I'll see here. And then what Tim is doing with that link is now he's over into the second kind of system that we need to set up, which is a storage and retrieval system. And in the Doing to Done method, I recommend 3 large buckets. 1, a list of lists, 2, a list of checklists, 3, a list of reference. So in this one, Tim's like bopping over to a reference category to store the ideas about the project. But OmniFocus becomes air traffic control and can point you to the right systems based on the project that you're holding. And so many systems these days have deep URLs that you can click into.
So Mike mentioned the compass. So the idea is these actions are essentially taking you along a path. They're leading you somewhere, and you've got the defined destination. And then we'll look at the star in a moment, but that's identifying this project as particularly important. It's one of the top 3 projects.
Tim, can you just click through a couple of the other roles?
Yeah, sure. Let's look at one where we've got some, maybe go into a work role. We've got some, a couple of coaching engagements here. So one with Jane, one with Tamer.
Perfect. And so in this particular role, if you think about, if you're a manager at a company, and one of the things you can do is you can take performance and put it in a project framework. So 2023 101 coaching completed with Thamir is a project. So here I am as a manager, and my job is to create the conditions for this person to be successful. So now I'm in a coaching posture in this role as a coach. So one of the things you can do to help you in this role is think about the questions that you want to ask this person when you're in the coaching role. So notice how Tim has placed these questions in there so he can be reminded when Thamir is in front of him to ask him a very specific question. For example, let's say this person was moving from just talking about bullet points and logic and trying to integrate storytelling into their presentation. That's a very specific practice. So that's something where you have to practice it so your nervous system gets used to it. So as a coach, I would be asking, did you practice? And then I would be asking a reflective question, how'd it go? And then I might be asking a third question, what would you do differently next time? And then the fourth question is, when is next time? So throughout the course of the year, you can keep track of this person and help them celebrate the win of trying and doing things for the first time, and then trying them for the second time and the third time and the fourth time and seeing how they grow. And by having this in a project framework, when you step into this role as a coach, you position yourself to be the best coach you can be in that moment. So that is super duper helpful if you're managing people over time. And sometimes you can even have the output if your company does performance reviews and you had things that you want them to work on throughout the year, those can become source material that's reference material for your coaching in the next cycle.
A couple of little OmniFocus details to point out. First of all, the coaching questions are assigned an agenda, a tag, and that tag is on hold. So these aren't going to show up in your next action lists and things. They're not, because they're not something you're probably going to be interacting with unless you're with this client. There's one about contacting Tamer about extending coaching for another year. And it doesn't make sense to see this one in May because it's not time to have that conversation. So this one has been deferred to December 1st. And the idea is you do want to make sure it's done by December 20th before the holidays begin. So that kind of puts it out into the future. And if I wanted to, I could just go to view and say, I only want to see what's available. And then I've got a list of actions here. And then the last one here, the assumption is that this mind map was promised to Tamer by the end of the day today. So this is a way of honoring that integrity and making sure that it's actually delivered when promised. So this one has a due date on it.
I just saw the comment, Peg, that you posted in the chat too, which is a beautiful one. You can do this in reverse too. So, Peg has a situation where she's always boss ready. So she has a list of things that she wants to talk to her boss about at any point in time. So that's another wonderful way to do it. And this concept can be applied managing up, managing down, and also managing sideways with colleagues and or operational meetings that you need to go to on a regular basis. You might bring a question to a team meeting or an agile sprint, things like that as well.
Maybe look at one that's not a project, it's a single action list here. So if we jump over to CEO, it would probably be a longer list in reality, but there's one item on here that's not connected with a defined outcome. So that's one thing I've always liked about OmniFocus is you can have a project in the sense that has a beginning and an end, but you can also just have a list of related items, in this case, to the role of CEO.
And something like this, if you go back to the role clarity map idea, and each role has the top practices, top 3 practices that matter most. So this CEO in that role may have a practice of communication. And this may be an output of that practice and being mindful of, I need to communicate in small, consistent increments in order for me to be on the path of mastery in my communication skills. So that's another way you can hold it. And single actions are great places to hold, recurring tasks or reminders of things you want to do as far as a practice within a role.
And another example of that, where you have repeating items, this is one just on the kind of nuts and bolts of system maintenance. So maybe you're not processing your physical inbox at work or home, or you're not going into a sauna to see, what's waiting for you there. So these are ones where they repeat on a specific schedule. And again, if I'm not interested in unavailable ones, I can just say what's actually available for me to work on.
And a pattern that I'm seeing these days is, another inbox is your Slack inbox or your group chat inboxes. So key things to monitor and make sure you're on top of. And going back to the notion of work beats too, you might, these might even fit into a pattern of, oh, that's a micro beat. That's a 15-minute beat. That's a more than 15-minute beat. But if you get into the idea of what is the rhythm of my week and how can I that's just a beat. There's something about that word, it's our heartbeat. It's musical. And if I just do a beat of email, it sounds so much better than, I got to do email. It's an agreement with yourself that I'm going to do email for 15 minutes and then I'm going to get out. Boom. All of these systems are designed so you can keep, and renegotiate agreements with yourself and others. So that's kind of the art behind how you structure and see OmniFocus. Can it help you keep, and renegotiate agreements? Another way to say it, going back to my failed date night, is can I now keep my word a little better? Can I go back and play with my kids because I said I would? As you build out your system and you have this particular view, what I'd like you to be able to answer for yourself, particularly as you come in and out of your weekly reviews, is this. Do I feel appropriately engaged with all the roles that I hold in my life? Do I feel appropriately engaged with all the roles that I hold in my life? Am I properly energizing them to the degree that I desire to, that matches my purpose and vision for that role? Is there a role that's sucking more energy and therefore other roles are suffering? And how might I recalibrate? And that question may lead you to some bigger questions that you have to name, work through as you try to feel appropriately engaged with your life. It's a simple question to ask, but it can be a more complicated question to tease apart. But now you've got the structure to tease it apart. So, Tim, I think you're going to head down to some really cool tips, and I think one of them might have been, in the doing to done methodology, when you come out of a weekly review, we call it a review it step. I ask the person who's owning their trusted system to flag their top 3 projects for the coming week and their top 5 actions. And Tim has so elegantly created some views. You can see them there on the left: 3 projects, 5 actions. So why do I ask people to do that? Because what we're after is momentum. Is that the totality of the work you need to do in the coming week? Absolutely not. But by giving you a beautiful constraint of the top 3 projects and top 5 actions, I help you see what matters most and create momentum on those things. So, doing to done, productivity made simple. Always trying to simplify what you see so you can win more and win with intention. So that's what those views are about. Tim, did you want to illuminate the setup behind that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go into the projects first of all. So as I pointed out, there's some of the projects have a star, and the idea is to allow up to 3 of these projects to have stars on them. And if you want to star a 4th project, then you would remove a star on one of these other 3 to make room for it. And the way this is built, if we go into the perspective settings, it's a very simple one. It just says, show me everything that's available that matches the search term star. So you could, in theory, if you know a project's going to be important next week, you could defer it off to next week and put a star on it, and then it could slide into this spot. But it's just a very easy way to add or remove things from this list in a really kind of dynamic way. So that's the projects. If we go down to the actions, so the idea is to have 5 actions that have a top 5 on them, or up to 5. So you'll see there's 5 on the list here. And again, this is a very simple one. It's everything that's available that's tagged with top 5. So same with projects. If you wanted to choose a different top 5, you would just remove top 5 from one of these and apply it to a different one. And I took that a bit of a step further if we go into forecast. So in forecast, you can define what's called a forecast tab. So it's actually set to top 5. So when you go in to look at your day, and here's the do item that we saw earlier, you'll also see all of the top 5 items down below. And personally, I'd probably want to just click on today, so I'm not seeing too much all at once, but it's just a nice way to pull all of those things together into one central view.
So something that I see with some of my clients that they find particularly effective is taking a view like this and printing it out and using it as their note-taking tool for the day. So they're adding to it, they're completing stuff, they're writing something down that they need to do, they do it. And then at the end of the day, they take that paper version and reconcile it back to their digital version. So then they get all the benefits of the views and creating the new view for tomorrow. But it's a pattern that I've seen for some that helps them do the digital to paper back to digital dance. So these views that you've created are created from your wisdom. These tag top 5 actions are love notes to your current self from your past self. So notice how we're starting to tie the pieces back together. How can the current me help the future me become the best me? Wow, you're seeing it right here in black and white, because these are the love notes you toss forward to your future self. And then you start to see the value of a well-written next action, because it's clear that you can see the hero doing it. I love this view too, because it shows you the project that it's associated with, so it gives you context as well. So just another tip based on a pattern that I've seen with many folks, and hopefully it can help somebody here. Working on your calendar and defining and blocking. Basically, there's two kind of like calendar moves, blocking and batching. And blocking allows you to create space to say, name it for a role if you want to. I have a client who was a busy business professional, but a creative as well, an actor. And so she needed time in her week to work on the acting piece. So it started out as a 15-minute beat. Then it became a 2-hour creative moment on Thursdays. And then it became a career transition because she's like, you know what? I want to be doing this full time. So it's interesting how these emerging roles can make a shift in your life if you give them a little moment to breathe and you can explore them over a period of time. So putting your beats in your calendar and holding that space as sacred space is a good thing.
And just to add to that on a very practical level, one thing that can be very useful is you could even take one of these folders like the CEO role. I could drop it right onto the calendar. And in the process, it's created a link back to OmniFocus. So when 10 a.m. tomorrow shows up, I can just click on that link. I'll be taken exactly where I need to be in OmniFocus, and I can go to work. And this is an hour by default. I could make it a 15-minute block or a couple of work beats to make it 30 minutes, that type of thing. Similarly, you could take a project. Maybe I want to work on this golf tournament on Saturday, so I could just drop that onto my calendar, and I've made an appointment with myself to move the needle on that specific project and maybe do some research, book some flights, things like that.
That's super duper powerful.
One thing with OmniFocus is you can use it in a very simple way, but you can add efficiency to the app. There's things you can do behind the scenes. So one expression of that is being able to create these different perspectives. So I've got one call today, for instance, that's showing me my top 5, but it's also showing me things that have become available that have landed on my plate. It's making me aware of some deadlines, some commitments I've made. So that can be a nice way to pull it onto that list. And then you can use a tag to say, okay, this is my list for today. I just want to see phone calls or I only want to see emails I need to write or something like that. And then as you complete the things on your list for today, then those tags will disappear from the sidebar. So I know I don't have any more emails on my list for today. So that can be very useful. I also find it's very useful to kind of make sure that the system itself is reliable, it's up to date, things aren't going to fall through the cracks. So if you decide you want to put a tag on everything, it can be useful to have a quick perspective to see, is there anything that doesn't have a tag? Similarly, you might have some projects that are stalled. So that means there's a couple of projects in here where there's a defined outcome, but there isn't an action to move it forward. So this is a really quick way to just go in there and say, okay, is this true? Have the benefits been updated? Has the will trust been created? If not, what's one action that I could do? Maybe it's to call or email someone or something to get that missing piece of information. What's one more thing to do? So if I did have something in here to say, contact John about lawyer recommendations, and then I maybe make that an email, that'll disappear. It's no longer a stalled project. So one of the reasons I use this compass in the name is it makes it possible to say, show me all of my active projects. So this one just shows the projects that contain the compass and projects that are currently active. So that's just a quick way to say, how much do I have on my plate? Can I take on any more projects in these roles, or is it better that I spend a little time wrapping up some of these projects, bringing them to fruition before I start anything new? And the last one, which really showcases the power of plugins, and plugins are a way to extend OmniFocus. And this is one of my favorite plugins written by Caitlin Salsky, who's a very talented woman based in Australia, who's also been a guest here on Learn OmniFocus. And let's say you're doing a lot of these client engagements and you don't want to have to start from scratch each time. What you can do is have a template where you can ask it to say, what year is this engagement? Who's the client? And you can even have it put it into the coach folder automatically. So I won't show the mechanics of this in detail today, but just to show you how it works, I'm going to go into the automation menu and choose create from template. And let's say the year is, we're getting ahead here, getting a client for 2024. And this is going to be with John Smith. So I'll say continue. And just like that, I've got a new project, and you'll see it's put John Smith's name in, it's put in the year. It's even calculated when do I need to reach out to John Smith to talk about extending the coaching for another year. So this is a very simple example, but if there's projects that you do over and over again, creating a template will prompt you to think through what you actually do in this type of project, and it'll give you a really quick way to create a project that has all of the thinking done by your past self. You don't have to really think that through. Definitely something to check out, especially as you get more advanced into using OmniFocus. So
let's kick it over to some questions.
Yeah, okay, sounds great. So there's a question about the three projects. Is that 3 for personal and 3 for work, or 3 total? And same idea with the top 5 actions. Is that across your entire life, or could you have your top 5 actions at work and top 5 personal actions?
Yeah. So the intent, the design parameters for that is it's your trusted system. So in Doing to Done, Productivity Made Simple, I start with the simplest form to create momentum. So it can be 1 personal project, 2 professional, and then, same with the actions. Or if you find it more valuable to see it with the way that you're asking in the question, certainly create that for yourself. It's a very context-specific question. And as you design your trusted system, it's got one customer, your brain. And it needs to see what it needs to see so you can, move forward appropriately in your life. So at the foundation of all of this, experiment and see what works best with you.
And I would add, start small, sort of underestimate how much time things are going to take, and start with the simplest possible system you can get away with, and then add complexity as time goes on. What does David Allen say? As simple as possible, but no simpler. Yes. So there's going to be a certain amount of complexity needed to manage your life if you do have 3 businesses and 12 kids and, all these sorts of things. I've never actually met anyone with 12 kids, but met someone with 7 or 8, I think, at one point. But a simple system is probably not going to do it. But yeah, again, just build it out over time. And I think another thing too is I know I've put pressure on myself in the past to have the perfect system right from the get-go. I just read this amazing book called Doing to Done, and by Monday, I want to have everything perfectly implemented. And I think it very much is a process, something you're going to iterate on. You're going to continuously improve until you get to a point where it's very workable, and even then, you're probably going to find some opportunities to improve it over time.
Agreed. Simple. I walk people from complexity back to simplicity. Is usually the direction I take people with current systems. Yeah.
If it is getting complex, maybe that's a sign they have too many rules. Is that something you've run into, Mike, where people just have a few too many hats in their collection, or is it?
Usually it's not at the role level, because that's a pretty accurate indicator of their life. It's usually on the overhead of putting information in their system and overhead of getting information out of their system. They make it too complicated. It becomes a burden to put information in the system and create the views that they need. So that's the first place I look. And then the larger question about perspective, and you've only got so many years in a life, and you've only got so many hours in a day, can be revealed in the number of roles that you're holding and juggling. But that's a different level of conversation. So one is where you're going in life and why, and the other one is right down at the detail level. How complicated is it to use your system and get information in and out in a way that serves you? So it depends on where the conversation is at that moment in time on which direction I look at. But typically, most of the time, it's the complexity that they've put into creating an action in their system or something. Too much overhead.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and that's where the efficiency is so key in terms of something we talk about a lot on Learn OmniFocus is how to do this as quickly and efficiently and consistently as possible. So,
yeah.
There's a question Felicity asks, in terms of scheduling time during the week, do you schedule microbeats too, at least until it becomes a habit to work in microbeats? And how do you help your future self by not overestimating how much you can get done in each 15-minute beat?
Yeah. So, the beats are designed almost to hold focus for a period of time so you can keep an agreement with yourself and chip away at life. And the idea there is the more you can hold your focus and keep that micro agreement with yourself, you win, your confidence goes up, and you create a momentum. And usually you move something where you ping the universe and it will come back with information that didn't exist before because you took an action. So that's the intention of a beat. Now, some of these beats you can schedule, and some of them can be, like jazz. You can just bring them into focus. Like I have on my Apple Watch, I have 2 timers, a 5-minute timer and a 15-minute timer. And when I just want to hold my focus on something, I'm like, Mike, you're going to hold your focus on X, boom, 5 minutes, do as much as you can, end, and then see where you're at the end of the 5 minutes. Sometimes I have to register the next action and leave the thing. Sometimes I'm like, hey, that was cool. I got some momentum. I'm going to keep on going. So it really depends on the nature of what you're working on. But the notion of a beat helps you create momentum. Another example is particularly like with working out. Let's say that I desire to have a deep workout beat, but right now I'm only accessible to like a micro beat, like maybe 5 minutes of mindfulness. Maybe even that's too much. Maybe 3 breaths, and then 1 minute, and then 2 minutes, and then 5 minutes. And before you know it, you're meditating for like 20 minutes or something like that.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Something feels too big, try to make it smaller.
Yeah, just play with this stuff too. And I think the doing to done approach by definition is a very playful one. So, I just love that term microbeat as well. It's just, it doesn't feel like work suddenly. It's more like dancing or playing an instrument or something like that. There is a natural rhythm to life. And I think it's a way of just kind of tapping into that natural rhythm where it might even start to feel a bit effortless. Some of the things that used to feel like real chores.
Yes. And there is a section in the book where, if you're familiar with the concept of wabi-sabi, it's like the art of things imperfect and incomplete. And that's the way I hold productivity. And that's how I celebrate it too. It's like, be perfect in your imperfections, be kind to yourself, because you're beautiful and you are wabi-sabi at any moment in time. So imperfect in your imperfection, and that's okay. And it's actually beautiful. So the book is, if nothing else, I hope it's a message of kindness for oneself, a message of kindness for others.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. And I want to Thank you, Mike, so much for coming and sharing your time and wisdom that you built up over many years, and thanks to everyone for being here live. And as you come to these live sessions, you're also contributing to the recording that maybe you're watching right now, being even richer because it's really tapping into many people's different experiences from being in the live session. So thank you again, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Okay, take care. Bye for now.
Thanks, Tim.